What is going on, YouTube? I am Germ here, as you guys can see up on the screen. Today, we are going to be running through my LCS playoff predictions. We're going to be going over a little bit about the games that we saw this past weekend. It was kind of an interesting week. Obviously, C9 TL was really hype. TSM 100 Thieves, maybe it wasn't as hype, but there's still some things to talk about, obviously, as TSM is now moving on forward ahead to the semifinals. This is going to be a really big weekend. Obviously, LCS finals is always a really big stage. I'm very curious to see what the hype is going to be around these series. We have the three biggest organizations, the three biggest fan bases left, so that's usually a good sign. I want to see how hyped people are, how interested they are, what viewership ends up being like. But then also, we have a title on the line. We have who gets to go to MSI on the line. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. You know, sometimes the LCS teams just kind of go there and make a fool of themselves a little bit. But every once in a while, you get a TL making it to the finals, going on a little run. There are definitely a ton of people hyped up for TL, TSM, Cloud9. I think all three teams have at least a legitimate case and a little legitimate shot at potentially winning the title. I don't think any one of these three teams is way below the other three. So I think that should make it fun, make it interesting. I'm also going to be looking ahead, giving my predictions on what I think is going to be happening in these series, and then we'll go from there. But before we get into that, I just want to mention real quick, if you guys have not already, please take a second and click that subscribe button. It helps you guys stay up to date on all my latest content. Obviously, it helps me out as well, running up those numbers, making us look better. Also, drop a like on this video if you guys do enjoy it. I would appreciate it so much. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. With that being said, let's get right into this. Last week, so on Saturday, we saw C9 and TL. Obviously, this was a little bit of an interesting series. There was some big trash talk coming into it. TL, obviously, we've seen this best of 5 happen before. TL against Cloud9 in the lock-in tournament, where TL did get the best of them 3-2. At that time, TL was looking like a much better team, but Cloud9 kind of played better than they had looked previously, and they took it all the way to Game 5 against Team Liquid, and then over the course of the regular season, I believe TL 2-0'd Cloud9, so a lot of the things were pointing in Team Liquid's favor, were pointing in Team Liquid's direction, except for the fact that Cloud9 was the #1 team in the regular season, the fact that Cloud9 has playoff perks, the fact that Cloud9 was coming in looking really good. They were fresh off a 3-0 against 100 Thieves, and TL had, yes, it was a 3-1 against TSM, but it was overall a close-ish series that TSM definitely had some chances to win. So obviously Cloud9 ended up getting the better of Team Liquid in the series, and honestly it wasn't really that close. Yes, it was 3-1, but I think overall Cloud9 showed that they are maybe a caliber above Team Liquid right now, or at least in that head-to-head matchup. They do match up favorably with them. They are able to play more styles, they're able to be more versatile, and that overall they can just be just a really good team. I think Cloud9 is definitely looking like the best team in North America right now, the best team in the LCS. They have three legitimate threats. I mean, between Blabber, Perks, and Sven, three guys who really have a chance to carry each and every single game that they're in. And when those three guys are playing at their best, this team's scary. You know, Vulcan is a great facilitator. He's a great guy at making plays, starting things for these three huge carries. And then Fudge, even though I do believe he's still a little bit weaker, I think he is finding a role on this team. They are finding ways to play around him, and he is finding ways to stay relevant in games and be successful even against, you know, Alfari, who is perhaps the MVP of the LCS, perhaps one of the best top laners in the West this past season. So a lot of things pointing good in Cloud9's direction. Obviously, they were able to knock off Team Liquid. They did send them down into match 7 down here, which is going to be taking place on this Saturday, obviously. And then we had TSM against 100 Thieves. This series was not that hyped up going into it. A lot of people have been super down on 100 Thieves recently, obviously, with a lot of the mid lane changes. The team's been looking bad. Closer's been slumping. Someday has been slumping. Mid lane, Ryoma hasn't been terrible, but he certainly hasn't been good, and certainly hasn't been good enough for what this team needs. Yes, 100 Thieves were able to take a game off TSM, but they looked really bad in their losses, and TSM did not look great in the series by any means. Obviously, 100 Thieves was able to actually generate some leads against them. They were actually able to look solid in a couple of these games, but I mean, most of the time in the late game, TSM really just out-macroed them, just kind of danced around them, and a lot of the games ended up being really ugly for 100 Thieves. Not a great series win for TSM, but it's the playoffs. You got to get the job done. They beat Evil Geniuses. They beat 100 Thieves. It wasn't always pretty, but they did make it here. And now, obviously, they get the rematch with Team Liquid here. And this is a match that I'm actually very excited for. So now that we've kind of talked about the three teams, again, I'm thinking really good about Cloud9 right now. This past week, I was really hyped about Team Liquid coming into this series, but they kind of took a step back against Cloud9, obviously, and then TSM, I think they're just kind of staying flat. I think they're a solid team. I think they're okay, but I think things are going to be tough for them. So when we take a look at this first series, this first matchup, TSM against Team Liquid in the semifinals, who has a chance to go on and face Cloud9 in the finals. So I put out a poll, obviously this morning. I know it's got about 1,500 votes or something so far. I know usually our polls get around 5,000, so it hasn't gotten out to everybody yet. We'll see how it finishes throughout the rest of the day, but most people have Cloud9 as a favorite, but then they actually have TSM as the second favorite. So I don't know if that's just because people think TSM could potentially match up better against Cloud9, or if people really just see TSM as favorites against Team Liquid, which either way I wouldn't be totally shocked, because again, I know that people think it's weird when teams make runs from the lower bracket all the time, because obviously to be in the lower bracket, that means you already lost a matchup. Like, we already saw TL play TSM, and yes, TL won 3-1, so now they're matching up again. Why would you pick TSM? But we have seen time and time again in the LCS and in the LEC, I believe G2, all of their recent championships are all coming from the losers bracket, where they've had to win series against teams that had beat them previously, and they'd have to do it again. But then even in the LCS, this most recent season with TSM headed to the lower bracket pretty early on, obviously with that loss to Golden Guardians, then coming back, beating Golden Guardians, beating Team Liquid, beating FlyQuest in the finals. Teams have shown that sometimes the lower bracket can be a good thing for you. Sometimes you get some games against some easier teams, you get chances to figure some stuff out. TSM got to win against Evil Geniuses, they got to win against 100 Thieves, they're building up some confidence, they're figuring out some things, as to where Team Liquid, they're coming off a stomp against Cloud9, who knows exactly how they're going to be feeling. So in that regard, I could see a little bit of a TSM favoring. Also in this past series, even though Team Liquid beat TSM 3-1, and this series maybe doesn't look great for TSM, they just played this a couple weeks ago, 3-1. That doesn't seem that close, but this series was actually super, super close in my opinion. TSM was able to take a game, and in game one, I think TSM threw like a 7,000 or 6,000 gold lead or something like that. Like, it was a game that I think TSM would win like 75% plus of the time, and then the series could have been 2-2. We could have been headed to a game 5, and even if TSM still lost there, that's still a 3-2 series, which in most people's books would be a coin flip. But TSM could have been tilted from that game 1. Maybe they're just bad and they were never going to be able to close that out anyway. But Team Liquid is this early game oriented team that likes to force people into mistakes, and TSM is more of this scaling team, this team that's going to out macro you, and they're not really going to do much in the early game. Power of Evil's not really looking to roam and make plays. Spica's not really setting up too much in the early game. Hooney's playing a lot of weak side and tanks and stuff, so he's not proactive. He's not like pulling out solo kills and doing a lot of the Hooney things that we'd necessarily usually find. And usually an early game team against a late game team, I tend to favor the early game team a little bit. I think it's much harder to pull off, but I think it is the style that's going to make you a better team. I think you need to be trying to make plays. I think you need to be trying to force the issue, because on the international stage, if you're just waiting to scale, if you're just trying to survive the early game waiting for mistakes, that stuff can be really, really difficult. That can be tough to get that to work, because a lot of these, the best Korean teams and best Chinese teams, they'll pick you apart in the early game. They'll force you into crazy fights. They'll make you get uncomfortable, and you'll really struggle. But honestly, the level of the LCS has not been that high this season. I think Cloud9 is looking like our only team that would even potentially have some success on the international stage. When I look at TL and TSM, they've both been pretty disappointing this year. Maybe TSM has overperformed some people's expectations and they're still all right, but for the history of TSM, I'd say they're in a pretty disappointing place right now. And then Team Liquid, with all the talent they have, making 2 upgrades in the offseason, having Alfari play at an MVP level, I would say their level of play is really, really disappointing. I don't think they should be losing to Cloud9 3-1 in the semifinals. So when I look at these two teams that both have a ton of flaws, I could definitely see these games going late. I could definitely see these games dragging out. I could see both teams not really having a clean game, having clean styles. And in my opinion, that could definitely give TSM an opportunity to steal some games and to win some games. And again, I think there's something to be said about getting a couple wins under your belt in the lower bracket. And I think historically we've seen that teams really, really benefit from that. So in the end, that's pretty much just a long-winded way to say that I'm going to be taking TSM 3-2 over Team Liquid. Also, it's usually pretty hard to beat a team twice in a 5-game series. I mean, if teams are close, if the teams aren't close, obviously it's easy. But when teams are kind of evenly matched, TSM was the second best team in the regular season. They finished above Team Liquid. They're at least comparable teams. It can be tough to win back-to-back best of 5s because just when the games are close, if games are toss-ups, 55-45 games, eventually this stuff's going to start breaking the other team's way. And again, would I be surprised at all if Team Liquid wins? No. Would I be surprised at all if Team Liquid even 3-0'd them? No. Both of these teams have been so inconsistent and so really unpredictable week to week, and they've looked so up and down. TSM at times has looked very, very good. Team Liquid at their best has looked probably even better dating back to the lock-in tournament. But they both at times looked terrible. Obviously with TSM really struggling in lock-in, really struggling at the beginning of LCS. And Team Liquid, they were like the 5th or 6th best team in terms of record a couple weeks into the LCS split. So these teams have both had high highs and low lows. Who knows what's going to come out this week, but the TL I saw against TSM the first week is definitely not the TL I saw against Cloud9 last week, so that's a little bit concerning to me, and I have TSM moving on to the finals against Cloud9, but once they get there, I think they're running into a team that is just set on going to MSI, is set, I think they're on a collision course, you know. Cloud9 is looking to claim another LCS title, Perkz is looking to head to MSI and show that he can make NA great, that he can make NA respectable on the international stage. I'm sure he wants to get a matchup against G2. I'm sure, you know, there's so much motivation there. Sven is a guy who's obviously had a storied career, and he wants to prove himself. Blabber, a lot of these Cloud9 guys, they wanted to go to international competitions last year. They didn't get a chance to go to MSI. They didn't qualify for Worlds. They're hungry, and their team is honestly just playing really, really good right now. And even if TSM finds a way to grind it out against Team Liquid, I think Cloud9 is just too talented. They have too many ways to win. Their best players are honestly looking really, really great right now. They can play multiple different styles. They're so flexible in draft. They have so many different people who can carry games. They can play different styles. They have so many different win conditions. I do still think Fudge is one of the weakest members on either of these teams, but Cloud9 has done a lot of things to cover him up. They have a lot of strategies and stuff, and they're figuring ways to make Fudge a functioning member of this team and figuring out ways to make this all work. And honestly, that's been really, really impressive. And I do think Fudge is going to continue to grow. I think these playoffs are an awesome experience for him. I think if they make it to MSI, that's going to be an awesome experience for him as well. Honestly, I don't really see this final series being that close, whether it's C9 against TL or TSM. I don't think either team has showed that much in terms of having an answer for this Cloud9 team. In the end, I'll take Cloud9 3-1 over TSM. I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to take a game. You know, Cloud9, Perkz, they kind of play that crazy style. Blabber, he'll have some terrible early games sometimes. Perkz will, you know, maybe int a little bit here and there. Sometimes he's still got some of that old G2 in him. Maybe Fudge gets gapped one game. There's ways that TSM could win a game, but I really think it would be difficult for TSM or Team Liquid to win 3 games. So I do have Cloud9 going to MSI, winning the title, and we'll see what happens there, being North America's representative. And yeah, hopefully they do well. I mean, I want to see any team in the West go out to international competition. Hopefully, you know, show what the West can do. Hopefully earn us some respect. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. These are my final LCS playoff predictions. The last one we're going to be doing, yeah, because, I mean, after this, it's done. Then we're on to MSI next, where I'm going to be doing power rankings, predictions, all that good stuff. It should be a ton of fun. Definitely drop a like if you did enjoy this video. I'd appreciate it a ton. Leave a comment down below. What are your LCS playoff predictions? Subscribe to Sip Dan on my latest content. Hopefully catch you guys in the next one. But until then, peace!